Hi, today we have Klaus Tischhauser, who really is one of the pioneers in this field and headed up now a $5 billion asset manager by the name of responsAbility. I'm sure you're all aware of it. And we have the pleasure of talking to him and getting his point of view and some of his advice for our younger audience. So, Klaus, welcome today. It's
Hi
great to have
everyone.
you.
Hi Astad.
Good. And Klaus is, if you don't know, but he's sailing around the world in his boat. So which is quite an adventurous path. So I live vicariously through Klaus when I talk to him. So Klaus, just to start out, you were a banker with Credit Suisse, in high finance. What got you interested in microfinance and the work of responsAbility? Maybe you can show some light on that.
Well, I think before I got interested into microfinance, I had a more keen interest in environmental issues. I don't know where that comes from. I think that was always a little bit in my character or upbringing. And in that process, I already, when I was at Credit Suisse, I already tried to find out whether something could be done about that. Then got involved in a fund they managed there. And in that process, I switched to a small startup company that was active in that field, in environment and investment. And participated basically in that startup and in the first process, and which then led to quite some growth. But actually, quite early on, I left the company because I had another dream, which I still have, which is exploring the world. And I embarked with my wife on a bicycle journey from Zurich to Cape Town. So we crossed the African continent. And so we stopped everything, quit everything, and just left everything behind and cycled through Africa. And obviously, if you cycle through Africa, you see, of course, a lot of daily life of ordinary people in Africa. And many of them are pretty poor. And that left quite a mark. So already during the journey, I felt it would be great if I could do something about professionally in my life about the situation where I could contribute something to make this situation a bit better. Um, well, and in that process, I also saw that a lot of people had already been active with foundations, grants, and whatever. And what I just saw is that a lot of signs of dilapidated things where people have left their marks with their names, what great things they've done, but it was not really adapted probably to the needs of the people. And so in the end, didn't work. So, I didn't really know what to do or how to do this until when we came back, by coincidence, more or less probably, I bumped into a gentleman called Leo Bechler, and he told me about some activities which we now today are called microfinance. He told me about that. I had never heard of that. I've never seen it during those 2 years of cycling. And that's how I first got into contact. And I was a bit suspicious, didn't really believe in this at the beginning, but then he showed me stuff. And I then just said, well, look, I mean, I would want to write a concept, how to if if I should believe in this, and how with my background, how I feel it should be done, then I can write this down. And that was actually in the end the blueprint for responsAbility. Because at the end he said, oh yeah, that's all great, but who should do it? And he looked at me and I said, look, I can't do it because I just came back from Africa. I have spent all my money. I need a job, and so that doesn't work. But for some reason, in the end, it worked. Another funny long story.
Yeah.
Um, so
Was Leo with the Credit Suisse? Leo
no,
Beckler?
he was a person who is not out of the financial market. He is
Yeah.
was at that time already an elderly gentleman,
Yeah.
uh, politician, also entrepreneur in South America, with a very big heart.
Yeah.
And he wanted, and he had quite some connections, and he wanted to make that something good.
Yeah.
That was his character.
Yeah.
And By the way, we both have our birthday on the same day, which is I don't know, something interesting. Anyway, no, he just happened to be there, and he was looking for someone who could, or other people who could help to make something fly, which he didn't know exactly what, but he knew microfinance is something that works. But he didn't know, didn't think about investment or a company or something like that. And we bumped into each other, and so he got me hooked, and then the rest is history.
Great. And so now you are at responsAbility and sort of trying to do. How were your first few years at responsAbility? How did you sort of, see the world, challenges that you came across? What was it like in the initial years at responsAbility?
Well, we started as an association. The first thing I said, well, we need a structure. The first structure we needed just to receive the money someone wanted to give us for free as a grant. Well, I wanted to do something that has a structure. So first an association, so that we could open a bank account. But then, of course, we needed to set up a company. So set up a company. And during that time, I lined up a few representatives of the Swiss financial sector, banks, asset managers, insurance companies. I mean, one of each element. And then it was a very hard and slow process. The first objective was to create a formal investment fund. There had already been one around at the time, that was Blue Orchard, but also just begun, but they were a little bit earlier. And so we knew, I mean, you can set up a fund, but it only a Luxembourg fund. And for us, it was important to have something that can be distributed publicly to the ordinary people in the street in Switzerland. And that was a very long and difficult process. And up until then, not much happened. I mean, not much happened means no money came in. I was just running from door to door, trying to convince people, mainly bankers, that they should offer such a product to their clients. And then interesting things happened. There was the UN Year of Microfinance, which of course helped, or microcredit, they called it, the UN Year of Microcredit. And Muhammad Yunus got his Nobel Peace Prize, and that, of course, led to quite some media attention for that topic. So we were lucky, I would say. Good timing. And then we also got that approval of the regulator in Switzerland that the fund could be distributed publicly. So a technical aspect was actually very, very important, that the whole thing then could grow. It didn't grow right from the beginning, but that was basically a prerequisite for growth.
Right. And as you were growing, were you looking at diversifying your business, or was it mostly focused on microfinance, and you saw, the scope of responsAbility as a microfinance-based institution, or at that stage, other sectors were not as well developed either?
No, my idea was, it was not actually my idea, because I copied, I heard about the Blue Orchard. When I analyzed a bit the market, I saw there was an interesting bank in the Netherlands, Triodos Bank, and they did where I came from, environmental investments, then energy, fair trade. And one part of my concept was that, first of all, the clients who one day would come to our shop, they want a choice. They don't want just microfinance and that's it, for all times. They want a choice. That was my idea. I'm not sure whether it's really like that, but I felt they need to have a choice. That's what it was, one aspect. The other important aspect is, or was, if you have employees and there's only one product, one topic, I mean, it gets maybe a bit boring. So I felt they also should have some choice, so that they could develop within the organization. Because if they've got some skills in the financial sector, Some of that might also be useful in some other sector, but they can also learn something. And then the third aspect, the diversification. Just one topic. I felt I'm a big fan of diversification, so I felt it also makes sense to offer various topics or have them in your portfolio as a company. And that's why right from the beginning I said, look, we need to have a company that has a certain size, a certain capacity, know-how in different fields. But of course, different fields also means you can maybe overdo it, and then it gets too complicated, and you do a lot of things that don't work. I mean, that's the other risk. But over the time, we analyzed whether what the topics should be. Should it be the ones I started with, or should it be more or less? And we analyzed health, stuff like that, and came to the conclusion a few things are just too complicated, or maybe are okay for later. And then we stayed with those three topics: energy, finance, and agriculture.
Great.
And
So
debt
I'm
and
sure
equity.
an equity product.
Debt and equity, yes. So in the end, it's actually six fields of activity, which is quite a lot. So you cannot grow everything at the same time simultaneously, but it's a diversified approach, which I think worked well.
So, Klaus, you must have faced a lot of challenges, right, as you were growing this business, and you overcame them. What was your proudest moment in your career at responsAbility? What you felt that you really achieved that was setting the stage for the future for responsAbility? What is your
That's
greatest achievement, if I may put it in this simple
yeah.
words?
I can't think, honestly, I can't think of just one event, and not because there were so many, but there were many maybe smaller things, um, which I liked. I mean, microfinance was something that if there is growth, then the obstacles are maybe growth, but not necessarily other things.
Yeah.
So and there I think we didn't really face so many problems, but it was more smaller things. Once we did a certificate, an investment certificate for press freedom,
Right.
and that remained very small.
Yeah.
But I felt, hey, this is the first time someone has done that, so that also it can be distributed publicly through normal financial players. I think George Soros, he was confronted with that, and he said, well, this is a great thing. And I think an African journalist, he said, this is the best thing that has happened in the 21st century for journalism. Well, that's journalism, so it's got nothing to do with microfinance, but it's that was something I liked a lot. And I liked a lot, still like the investments in agriculture,
Right.
because they're so much more difficult, and we grew quite nicely there. Had also some problems and lessons learned, but it was these kind of things, or the first apprenticeship. So when in Switzerland we have this system where people can do an apprenticeship in your company. So giving young people, being a company that can accept this, and giving young people the opportunity to work with you and train them, that those were things that I liked a lot. But there's not that single. Of
Yes.
course, when
Right.
we reached the first billion, of course that was great. That is, but it's not something that marked really my mind.
Yeah. But I would say, knowing a little bit about you, is that when you broke into the bank to issue your product in Switzerland and got that approval, I think that must have been a big success in that manner, right? I would count that
Yeah,
as one of your key moments.
I think that's true. Maybe it just came. I know that I was on holiday, and my wife, I was all the time in calls with the regulator, and I think soon after the OK came. And you're right, that was That was quite an achievement, yes. But it's a technicality, so it's something very dry. It's
Yeah.
it's a sentence, it's a letter. They say it's okay, and now you can do that. So I mean,
So
but
then, did the regulators then give licenses to other microfinance institution to do similar product, or you were unique?
maybe other companies had other strategies, other clients as target clients, or just didn't have the need, because enough money was coming in. After a while, institutional investors also caught some interest, and so maybe, yeah, that was a reason. Also, maybe also because it's just a bit more difficult to do that, but technically it was feasible. So, and I think even for quite a while, worldwide, most regulators just did not allow that. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
that's still, I think, today a problem.
yeah.
That they
I
allow a lot
we
of crazy stuff, but not these kind of things.
we tried in the U.S. and we failed. We couldn't do
Yeah,
it because the
yeah,
regulators wouldn't allow it.
yeah.
So going from your challenges and your successes, how do you see the impact in investment industry developing now, since you have been a bit removed for it, and how do you see the future of the sector?
Well, first of all, I think I have to say that I'm not anymore, or not an expert to answer this question, because, yeah, as you're saying, I'm far away. If you leave an industry, you lose very quickly the grasp of it. But maybe from what I've heard from other people who are still active in the industry, there's the overall topic of, let's say, us private sector players was always to bring in more private capital, and that's also the goal of the public financiers, the DFIs as they are called, to bring in more private sector players or private sector money. And obviously, I mean, what you would expect is that over time, more private sector money comes in, and the public money can, look for other more challenging things to do. And as I understand, this is not exactly happening. Actually, not only the figures go up, which would be okay, but the percentage of the public players in these fields has increased, which is the opposite of what you would expect.
Mhm.
And I guess analyzing why this is the case is tricky. There's certainly not just one reason. There's certainly a lot of reasons. Um, and But that's what I heard and see, that they're playing more and more a role. With that, of course, because they're different animals, they know it and we know it. That's why they want to bring in the private sector. So the public players, I think, they demand many more things than a private sector player would do. They maybe also want to do everything perfectly right from the beginning, and everything must be right. Whereas a private sector player would say, well, let's start with the biggest thing at hand and then become better over time.
Yeah, sure.
And if you start complicated, I mean, it starts complicated. It means also it starts slow, it starts small, it starts expensive, all these kind of
Yeah,
things,
sure.
consequences. And that's one thing I see. The other thing is, I see that a lot of based probably, and here I'm guessing, probably based on the success most of the time of microfinance, the players in this field have of course gained some experience, have also become a bit more important, have more assets under management, and so they venture into new fields. But a lot of these new fields, I feel, are pretty tricky, even much trickier than microfinance.
Mhm.
So I think quite a few might be struggling. I don't know the details here, but
Yeah,
from what I see, quite a few might be struggling with these more difficult things uh, to make them fly and grow and benefit from scale. So yeah, instead of growing something that's working, they venture into new things, which I understand. I think that innovation, in the end, that's innovation. And I think any industry should,
yeah.
of course, innovate. But at the same time, I mean, a lot of the industries that are big today, I mean, Coca-Cola has probably never innovated. They have had one drink and that's it. And
Right,
sometimes they
that's true.
change the color or whatever,
Yeah,
So, I mean, if something works, then you have to really see it through. But
right,
in microfinance, I think when it really grows, then you disappear as a private sector player because the banking sector
right,
will just take over automatically and normally. So it's all a bit complicated, and that's what I
right.
see. So yeah, it's a difficult time, but
Yeah,
I see that the people are still very, very much motivated and engaged, and there is growth, new topics, and I think it's still very, very fascinating.
yeah. In terms of private sector, right? We've been singing that mantra for bringing private sector, like you said, and you clearly there are so many advantages to the private sector coming in as a more efficient of investors. But the reality still is that they're lagging, right? I mean, even for companies, large companies, I'm not sure that private sector is the main source, right? Still, after 20 years, right? Responsibility's been there for 20 years. We still have a large percentage of development bank money. So how do you see the private sector challenges, and how can we get them to see the potentiality of investing in this, or is it more of a social responsibility? How do you see these two sort of, is it all about the potentiality of profit that private sector is focused on, or is there something else, a double bottom line framework that you would see to engage the private sector, Klaus?
Now, if I had now the right answer, it would be a bit strange because it would mean that all the people who are in the industry and thinking about this every day now for many years, longer than I have been doing, that they would be idiots. And I'm sure I know them; they're not. So
Yeah,
I think there's no easy answer to that question. Um, just one thought, or maybe two thoughts. One, the DFIs. I mean, if you put yourself into their shoes, I mean, you've got a job there. You want to grow your business as well.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it works, and you always ask probably for more money from the governments and so on, and then you want to deploy it, and you want to show the growth, and so you grow with the industry, and well, if you become bigger than the others, or if your percentage grows, well, that's it's maybe too bad, but that's what you want maybe because
yeah,
you're doing a good job. So as long as the money is available, now if you put yourself into the shoes of those who look for that money, as long as it's available, you go for it because
yeah,
normally it's earmarked for that purpose. So you take it. So if it wasn't there,
yeah,
maybe things were different. I don't know, maybe,
yeah,
but it's there. That's the one thing. Then the other, that means in the essence, it's probably difficult to get out of a business. Once you see the job is done, to say
yeah,
now that everything is so great, now we say goodbye. I mean, what do you do then? I mean, your job is maybe then obsolete. I mean, you don't
yeah,
do that. The other thing, I if it's I see that a lot of things get communicated now in this industry. Um, there's a lot of gender issues involved in these investments. There's what people call woke things, which of course are all right and important. But is it what investors want to hear? Of course, there's a group of investors who like to hear that. And if they hear this, they say, "Oh, I want to invest." But I believe this group is extremely small, particularly compared to the rest.
yeah,
For
right,
other investors, let's call them just mainstream investors. Although I believe this is a bit a simplifying term. For the others, I believe all these kind of things, which most actors in the industry, for them, that's normal that you do this, and it's also often imposed by the DFIs. I think that is not really attracting them. It's rather something that makes them cautious because they think, well, these guys are still funny people. So They talk about these issues we normally don't talk about, and maybe that is a reason why they still stand off. I don't know. I'm really
Yeah.
just guessing there, but I just think I always try to position what is being done as in the end just an industry which invests in companies that offer products for a very large group of people, and it's basic needs they really need and want and can pay for. So it's a huge market. So why shouldn't you invest?
Yeah.
So a very normal, pitch you would do. Of course, it is much more difficult. So most of the time, the people working in this industry earn a bit less than the people in the normal financial industry and stuff. Um, so, but you don't have to talk too much maybe about all those more social aspects, because it puts off a few investors maybe.
Yeah.
And we're just concentrating on the businesses and trying to carve out what the real essence of this is and why this is for any investor an interesting investment topic. I think that would be enough. Um, but that's me. That's how I thought I should
Yeah.
do
No.
it, and how it should be done. And if it's done in a different way today, there's certainly reasons for that.
Yeah. Right. I think the idea of investors, sort of paying normal commercial investors, right? They are interested with profits. That's what they get judged on. That's what they got to pay for. And so that's what they attracts them. And I think partly some of the perceptual issues around seeing Africa as, extremely risky and not looking at the opportunities there. It's just the finance industry is like sheeps. Everybody goes in one direction and everybody pulls
Yeah.
out in the other direction. But reality of, people investing in, impact investing as only profit motivated is it's I think it's not there. I don't see it. I mean, if most of the people have a double bottom line or some social issue or some aspect that they're doing for, and like you said, that element of it remains small, right? And also you have the issue, Klaus, on the capacity of these companies to take billions of dollars. I mean, so that is also an issue. The reality, the truth of
Yeah.
the issue is that we couldn't take billions of dollars, right? And that the risks are, perceptions are very great. And in order for the private sector, one of the things that I think about, Klaus, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, is that in the US, there is something called the Community Reinvestment Act, right? So it is requires banks to take, where they're taking deposits in a neighborhood, they're also to lend into that neighborhood. If you're going to take deposit money from them, you have to lend money within that
Yeah.
neighborhood
Yeah.
as well. And it's a very, yeah, I think it's a pragmatic law. Um, so that, that element has gotten a lot of money from banks and others into the Harlems and Bedford-Stuyvesant and, more distressed communities. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone there.
Mm.
And the banks coming in with the money also sort of, starts to develop that sector of affordable housing providers. So do you see there's a role for some regulation like priority sector lending in India for us to have, for companies to consider, because they're not in vacuum, they're in a society, right? is there is that too much to ask, or is there a regulation that says that, you have to fulfill some element of investing in development where possible? I'm not sure. I debate this, and I want to hear your
Yeah.
thoughts on that.
I think, I mean, we are talking here, should governments intervene in businesses? Is that a good idea? Should they force businesses into something they don't want to do on their own? Um, I mean, the example you mentioned, I think Shore Bank became
Yes,
big
sure.
through that a long time ago, so it worked apparently. But this is maybe because of the U.S. specific situation. I don't know that. In other countries, I don't see that. Maybe if they have areas which are totally underserved, yes, maybe then it makes sense because it worked in that case. So my answer would be yes, if the preconditions were the same as in the US where it worked. Yes, why not? Because it worked. If not,
Yeah,
then I would be hesitant because uh,
yeah,
it leads to distortion. Often, not the right people get
yeah.
the money, and then it's a failure.
Yeah.
And then people really put their hands off and don't want to
Right.
do anything anymore in this area.
Just like real politics, right? You have to be pragmatic about what the situation on the ground is, right? When I was at Deutsche Bank, right, Klaus, it was not there. This was very different. And we should talk about that a little bit about the role of Credit Suisse. And Deutsche Bank was doing this, before responsibility came into being. However, for them, it was more of a CSR, idea.
Yeah,
And for me, it was like, well, money is green. If they are doing it from CSR and I can do some of the first earlier funds in the sector, then so be it, right? But I think the for me the idea is that it is not one thing, right? So you get some people to do it because the regulation requires them to do it, some people to do it because they are double bottom line, and some see the on the equity side opportunities to make more money. I just in regulation is, you want to avoid regulation as much as you can, but there are some benefits to it where people are not coming to the stage after, I've been doing this for 30 years, right? And the private sector mantra is there. And if you look at the GIN reports, they're, quoting trillions of dollars in impact investing, but it's not the impact investing you and I have done, right?
yeah,
It's more
yeah.
project finance recasted into impact investing. Everything becomes impact investing. So it's really misleading for people because based on the definition. But what do you think? I mean, there is a balancing act here to be pragmatic and to say, okay, well, private sector is not come in. It's not coming in a meaningful way. We don't have the capacity to take the large scale private sector. Then where do we go for growth, right? Those things.
Uh, well, one thought I have here is that, and that goes a little bit back into the area where I came from, the what is now called ESG investments. That one question we always have to ask ourselves is, particularly as investors, what is actually what we really can achieve? How big is our role? Let's suppose everything worked so well. How big can it be? How important if you incorporate environmental aspects into investments? How much are you benefiting the environment? Isn't that maybe just too much hope in this, in the sense of over exaggerating um, what really is possible? It's world is not as easy that you just can say, okay, I invest in that way, and then the problem is solved. It There's maybe then a little bit something is a little bit better, but it's not the silver bullet. And maybe in this field as well, you mentioned the policymakers. With right policies, not for investments, and not particularly not for asset managers and their products, but po- po- policies in the real world, so that companies can grow and so on. That, or that there is stability, these kind of things. I think that is probably much more important, and we are maybe overestimating a little bit our role in what we really can achieve.
Mm,
Because
mm,
just particularly when someone invests through an investment vehicle into something, often this has anyway additional cost, and this is being done in larger companies often. So that is already very mature. But if you look at where you often want to intervene in the very difficult spaces, I mean, it's not
Yeah.
so normal that an investment fund, a foreign investment fund comes along and does the job.
Yeah.
There's so much more involved. And so maybe we all got a little bit our role wrong, or what we thought how important we are, maybe we are not. And we just think
Yeah.
it should be more, and we should be more important, and we are just not. Other things should work
Yeah.
before.
Right. We have seen, right? Blue Orchard was acquired by Schroeder. Responsibility was acquired by a UK asset manager. Sun Funder was acquired by Manora out of France. How do you see that trend of larger asset managers or companies taking in the specialized impact investor? Does that board a good sign for the future? How do you see that?
Uh, on one hand, I think it's a normal development, and one that is actually part of how it should work, because I mean, innovation always takes place in small enterprises, and then the big ones who are a bit slower and risk averse, they then, once they see, okay, now we see it works, then they buy it and incorporate it, which is totally normal and fine. And in the case of responsibility, we were, I mean, it happened when I was gone, but we started thinking about that long before, that we felt we need a strategic investor to get to the next level of growth. And not because we liked it and wanted to be owned by someone else, but we, for the cause, we felt this is the right thing to do. There's so much more money that needs to come in, and that requires another set of shareholders,
Yeah.
another vision, whatever.
Right.
And so I understand that this is something totally okay. On the other hand, I also see, because I think, now I don't know the motivation of all these players, but some of them probably acted because at that moment, or now even still now, it's just something good to do, and they thought
Right.
that we should do that.
Yeah. The niche
But
for them.
yeah, but if they lose interest, then that could be the first thing they say. Okay, let's stop that. Then either they close it down, which would be a pity, or they sell it. That's maybe then better. But there's of course a risk that in such big enterprises that you disappear, and
Yeah.
that the people behind who really want to push this forward, that they maybe then will leave as well, and then the show is over.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if there's something that works and it can be done, then I think that should survive. And if not, then maybe
Yeah.
it would
Yeah.
also have
Yeah.
disappeared if these companies had not been taken over.
Yeah. Right. So it's a double-edged sword, as what you're
Yeah,
saying.
but
It has some risks
but
attached to it. Yeah.
but to keep sort of the spirit, the objective of always staying focused on where the companies typically are. It's easier not to be, of course, a part of a large conglomerate which has other things in mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, it's also something that has more aspects to it, and therefore I think the way it worked is okay. It's just interesting that out of Switzerland, with big banks, I mean, they've been reduced to less than than they were,
Right.
but that two Swiss companies, um, leaders in their fields, that they both get bought by some foreign companies, both from the UK, interestingly enough, where
Yeah.
we don't see so much activity in that field. That's quite interesting, and it's a pity for Switzerland, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. That's because I think Credit Suisse, as I recall, Klaus, I was at Deutsche and struggling to get money or support from within Deutsche to really take it as a business. They saw it as CSR. They didn't see the markets. They didn't see the opportunity. Although I added to the bottom line of that CSR function. I wasn't a
Yeah.
cost per se. So I mean, Credit Suisse played a different role. But maybe you can talk about that now. Was it a important aspect of the responsibility growing, or the attitude to see it as a business rather than the Deutsche Bank attitude to see it more as a CSR play?
Yeah. I think that Credit Suisse being so big was very important. We had other banks behind us which were, in size smaller, but also very important, particularly when it came to putting in equity and stuff. Then they or seed capital, but where Credit Suisse, but also, for instance, Raiffeisen Bank, which is a large bank in Switzerland,
Yeah,
also played an important role where they just said, okay, look, we offer this, we put the fund or the funds, were then several, we put them on our offering shelf. So, and if people like it, okay, they liked it. So they just played a very normal business mind.
enabling environment.
Role.
Yeah,
They just said, okay, it's a product, you're a product provider, and if people like it, so be it,
yeah,
and then it
yeah,
grows. And they got their share of the management fee as the others, and very normal. And I think that's a big difference, and I think that's where we should
yeah.
get to, that we
Right.
provide them with good products. And so they all these banks, and now because Credit Suisse was bigger, they always get mentioned, but they certainly provided a lot of money. But what I think is important to mention behind that were always individual people.
Yes.
There's always one guy who thinks, oh, that's it, and then they push it through if they can.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that
yeah,
happened in all these banks, and so it's always the people's business, and we should not forget about that.
yeah. No,
And
exactly.
so we have
Exactly.
to identify those champions
Yeah.
and try to help them.
Great. I mean, maybe we can talk a little bit about the industry and the players like the foundation, development banks, and what their role. I mean, development banks, as you know, Klaus, they have played a very important role. They still constitute, a majority of the investment in this industry in impact investing, what we call impact investing, is not from the private sector, but from development banks.
Yeah.
And so I think from your perspective, what would you be say? We can't change everything, but what would be one thing that you could change at the development bank that could make a real significant impact? In your mind, what is that one thing that the development banks could do?
What they do, I think, is highly complex. They are
Yeah.
so much between politicians from all sorts
Yes, that's
of
right.
areas. Then they have the real world. Then they have us. Then and they are in a very difficult environment.
Yeah.
Um, I really have no advice. It's just um, maybe thinking about industry development. So what I felt that during my time was that they were looking at us as players, as private sector players, as well. It's okay that they're there, but actually we want the investors behind, direct contact to pension funds, whatever. But in the normal sector, there is this sharing of responsibilities, and that the pension funds, not all of them, but most of them, they don't go directly to a company or and invest in a project. They go through a professional structure, which are the asset managers. So
Right.
focusing more on how can we develop asset managers and turn them into big champions where size is really important.
Yeah.
I think that's important
Yeah.
because that's the players who
Yeah.
attract in the end
Yeah.
the end clients, be it institutional or private investors. And I think there they felt, okay, well, yeah, we know some of the DFIs are competitors
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
the private sector players because they
Yeah.
like it and it's a business. So they should maybe think a little bit more towards the asset managers or other structures who are part of the industrial development.
Yeah, yeah. I think that that element of sort of building asset managers of scale is also a role that development banks could play, right? This time, Klaus, after 20 funds or 18, whatever the funds have done, for the first time, I have seen we have a decarbonization of the textile apparel fund. It's a large fund, and IFC sort of allowed us to put their logo on the front page of the pitch book because they were co-creators of the fund and the lead
Yeah.
investor. So I think that because nobody knows SIMA, right? But everybody knows the World Bank at least, or IFC. So the role of development banks could be beyond money, but also
Mhm.
facilitating the growth of what you were talking. So I think that's an important point
Yeah.
to make, for development banks. But I think the challenges are also not one-sided, right? The
No.
development banks have challenges of, I guess, and so does the private sector. So one actor acting alone, we used to say, well, development banks, the senior tranches should be for this private sector investors. But if you don't have private sector investors, how are you going to fulfill those senior tranches as well? Uh, Maybe we can talk a little bit about a lot of young people are coming and they're looking at Klaus with a lot of respect and honor, and thinking about what did Klaus do that made him this way? What should I not the opportunity that you came around, but from that opportunity to creating success of the
Mhm.
company, what did you do? What, as a young person, what is your advice to young people in terms of business growth and creating something that they dream of?
Yeah. Yeah, I got asked these questions a few times when I was sitting in front of young people, and my advice always was, well, first of all, um, get a real job. I mean, you need to be an expert somewhere,
Right,
unless you're a genius, and then. But let's suppose that there's only a few geniuses. But first of all, get a proper job or education and know one business, at least one business well.
right,
Because what you if you venture into impact investment, I mean, you will venture into something that's pretty complicated. So if you're a beginner in all fields, I mean, hey, the chances of success are not that big. So you should have a clue about a few things.
yeah,
The more the better. So being super young is probably already a problem. You're probably just not experienced enough. You
yeah,
want the good things, but hey, this industry doesn't need beginners. The industry needs experts, and normally they're a bit older.
yeah,
So, and of course, if you're young, you're more risk tolerant, so you venture into things. So there's of course a trade-off. So, but I would say, first of all, go to Deutsche Bank or to Credit Suisse if it still existed, or to UBS. So go to a real player or in the industry, and build
learn the
experience. Yeah,
business.
exactly.
Yeah,
And then, based on that, you can say, okay, where are my strengths is. But it's not many people today. I feel young people, they think, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur because entrepreneurs become rich.
yeah,
I mean, most entrepreneurs are self-exploiting and never
yeah,
become rich. And most of the people who have started things like I have done, or the other people now survived in the industry, I mean, they have disappeared because they were not there at the right time. They were maybe more brilliant than the ones who are still around. Had
yeah. It was the
better
timing
ideas.
wasn't right. Yeah,
Exactly, but the timing was not right, and they have disappeared. So the other thing and that goes with this, you need to be, if you really want to start something from scratch like I did. I mean, you need a very very long breath, because it will take much longer than you think. And so being not only risk tolerant, but also able to take risk is really important. In my case, the situation was that my wife, she was working in a normal job, which paid everything we needed. So I could do crazy stuff which didn't bring in money. And and she wasn't nervous because I wasn't the breadwinner, or needn't be. So she provided that security so that I could do this for many years, because for many years it looked like something really totally weird, which would never fly.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to get through this financially, but also emotionally, psychologically, because it's not that easy. I
Yeah.
remember my friends, when I told them, at parties, oh, what are you doing? Well, if someone said, oh, I'm a lawyer at the bank, they said, oh, wow. They started talking about it. And when I said, well, what I was doing, which I find is more interesting, they said, ah, okay. And, and thought, okay, he's probably unemployed. And, he's doing some funny stuff. That's how it felt. And, if you see the success, then the things look easy. But a lot of people have failed
Yeah, you don't
on
see
that
the
path.
failures. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's really tough. And yeah, until you then really stop, you probably self-exploit a lot and suffer. And so my advice to young people would be, great, be in that area. We need more people. But maybe you can also do this in a big corporate, because the more people like that they have inside the big corporates, like you're a good example at Deutsche. I mean, I came out of
Yeah.
Credit Suisse and so on. All of us, I think, they have many of us have worked in bigger companies. I think that's how it works.
Yeah.
And if you stay there and you can change from there, from within, hey, that's good as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, not that's, I think, very good advice, that develop some expertise, go work in the, if you want to do finance, learn about, you know, Main Street
Yeah,
finance
yeah,
before you
yeah,
come to it. Be prepared to work very hard and to persevere and be challenged, and keep in perspective that not everybody who wants to be entrepreneur is successful. That's
yeah.
very realistic, very honest, advice to young people, which is important. But uh, when you can take risk the most is when you're young, because you don't have a lot of
Absolutely,
obligation.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
not everyone needs to become an entrepreneur. It's enough if they go and work for companies like
Yes.
responsAbility or the
Yes.
like, and bring in the motivation and
Yeah. Or
everything.
even
But
mainstream company.
even
Yeah.
there, the bigger these companies get, the more they need very normal skill sets.
Yeah.
So
Right.
in the early days, you could, have no clue of what we were doing, and start just because we were motivated. We would
Yes.
take these people.
Yeah.
Now, it needs some qualifications, because it has become more serious, bigger, more
Yeah.
structured, more regulated. So you need the normal lawyers and so on.
Great. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you, Klaus. I'm just looking at your beautiful boat in the background, and your adventurous hopping from one place to the other. So thank you, Klaus, and you have a
Thank you,
great day.
Asad. It was
Bye
a
bye.
pleasure. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Bye, Asad.
Bye bye.